So if you guys are ready.
You know, what I don't have, for some reason, I don't have any control, so I can't do.
Because you and I are both logged in. I wasn't sure if you were going to be on there or not.
Yeah, I can't, that's all right. I'll let you know I can't record or do anything. So.
I can do it.
Isn't it already recording? It looks like it's already recording. I see a little red thing in your corner.
There. It's recording.
Oh, there it is.
Linda started the recorder.
I did? No, I didn't.
Oh, then Ryan did.
All right. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Everybody needs to mute, though.
On the way.
Since I got the audio. All right, here goes. No, who's still on? Who's still making noise? Paul. It was Paul. Okay, here goes.
I'm muted.
Here goes.
I appreciate Linda taking the time to help me record this. It's the annual Veterans Day. I try and acknowledge all the service veterans in the club. You may have heard in the news that 2019 was the last year of Rolling Thunder. Next year, the AMVETS have submitted a permit request for an event beginning May 22nd, 2020 until May 24th, 2020 for 50,000 participants, which is around 10% of what they used to have for Rolling Thunder. There'll be a stage near the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and they'll have some patriotic entertainment. The mission of the event will remain the same: to bring attention to those unaccounted for of the 86,444 missing in action since World War I. The event will be called Rolling to Remember. Dr. Stephen Cromwell, may he rest in peace, is the bravest man I ever met, and he never picked up a gun. He was a corpsman on the first wave of the landing on Omaha Beach. Stories he told me about that day were horrifying. I would like to dedicate this presentation in his memory. And I would like to point out that Steve Cromwell had 50 years of perfect attendance at his Rotary Club. In 1918, on the 11th hour of the 11th day in the 11th month, the world rejoiced and celebrated. After 4 years of a bitter war, an armistice was signed. The war to end all wars was over. The First World War left 9 million soldiers dead and 21 million wounded, with Germany, Russia, Austria, Hungary, France, and Great Britain each losing nearly 1 million or more lives. In addition, 5 million civilians died from disease, starvation, or exposure. For the most part, people of Europe greeted the outbreak of World War I with jubilation. Most patriotically assumed that their country would be victorious within months. By the end of 1914, well over 1 million soldiers of various nationalities had been killed on the battlefields of Europe, and neither the Allies nor the Central Powers had a final victory in sight. Lieutenant Colonel Cram served in the U.S. Army from 1970 until 1995. He served in Germany, Saudi Arabia, and as a combat veteran somewhere. He didn't tell me where. He served as an artillery officer. Once while leading a 4.2 mile run in officer candidate school, the lieutenant in charge wanted all 3 companies singing the same song. John had no clue as to how to do that, nor was he interested in making that happen. The lieutenant got more and more livid, and at the end of the run, Indian John got to do lots of push-ups. He is a member of the International Fellowship of Rotarian Military Veterans and rides a 2016 Indian Dark Horse. I am proud of Indian John and his service. On the Western Front, the battle line that stretched across northern France and Belgium, the combatants settled down in the trenches for a terrible war of attrition. In 1918, the infusion of American troops and resources into the Western Front finally tipped the scale in the Allies' favor. Germany signed an armistice agreement with the Allies on November 11, 1918. World War I is known as a war to end all wars because of the great slaughter and destruction it caused. Unfortunately, the peace treaty that officially ended the conflict, the Treaty of Versailles of 1919, forced punitive measures on Germany that destabilized Europe and laid the groundwork for World War II. Excuse me. Maritime Enforcement Chief Petty Officer Harold Hill served in the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve for 33 years and also served as a police officer for 34 years, including 27 years with Charleston Police Department, including a stint as a motor officer and 7 years service with the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Chief Hill recalls Coast Guard duties with drug interdiction and search and rescue missions, which usually do not occur on a sunny summer day. One February morning at 2 a.m., Chief Hill and 3 other brave sailors saved 4 people on a sinking sailboat in 12-foot seas. Chief Hill had just saved a swimmer from near death by pulling him from the sea when they were both almost killed by a parting line. They didn't save the 4 souls, but they saved the sailboat as well. I'm sure that Harold and his shipmates saved many, many other people during the course of his career. I am proud of Chief Hill and his service. November 11th was set aside as Armistice Day in the United States to remember the sacrifices that men and women made during war in order to ensure a lasting peace. On Armistice Day, soldiers who survived the war marched in a parade through their hometowns. Politicians and veterans held ceremonies of thanks for the peace that had been won. On November 11th, we still have the opportunity to remember the efforts of those special people that have served and died in service to our country. In remembering, we pay homage to those who have bravely responded to the country's needs. During Keith Lundgren's first attempt at college, he majored in beer drinking and partying. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, and he ended up in the Marine Corps as a radar technician for a Hawk anti-air missile system. He served for 4 years and 14 months of which were in country in Vietnam. Keith was awarded a Purple Heart when he was in a landmine. There were several casualties, but luckily Keith made it. One of his memories of his service in Vietnam include his system misidentifying and launching a missile towards a French airliner heading for Da Nang. Due to the crew's quick thinking and immediate action, they were able to self-destruct the missile, averting disaster. As we heard at a recent meeting, Keith rode his cousin's CB-350 around Oahu in 1966 when he was there for R&R. I am proud of Keith and his service. On November 11th, we wear poppies. We pause for 2 minutes of silent tribute, and we attend commemorative ceremonies in memory of our wartime dead. Poppies are worn as a flower of remembrance, a reminder of the blood red flower which still grows on the site of battles fought in France and Belgium. Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, during the terrible bloodshed of the Second Battle of Ypres in the spring of 1915, wrote the poem In Flanders Fields, of which these flowers lived among the graves of dead soldiers. Riderman Second Class Robert Preston served aboard the USS Tulare from 1968 until 1972. He served in 3 campaigns during the Vietnam conflict, and during one of those cruises, the ship had a port visit in Japan. Many of the crew purchased motorcycles, which the Navy allowed them to put on the ship to get them home. This was under the condition that if the ship was redirected back to the Tonkin Gulf, the motorcycles would all be pushed over the side into the ocean. Robert was lucky enough to get the Honda CL350 he purchased back to San Diego, where he rode it for a year. When he was ready to get out and go back to Maryland, he built a trailer and towed it back to Maryland. Robert still feels a tinge of regret for selling the Honda. He bought it for $350 and sold it for $800, which paid for the birth of his first child. He is probably better off with his Super Tanara. I am proud of Robert and his service. Flowers and the larks in the poem serve as reminders of nature's ability to withstand the destructive elements of war by men, a symbol of hope in a period of human despair. The poppy was adopted for a symbolic purpose after the First World War. A French woman, Madame Guérin, suggested to Field Marshal Earl Haig of the British forces that women and children in devastated areas of France could produce the poppies for sale. The first British Poppy Day appeal was in November 1921 and has continued since in Britain and other countries. In America, many of the poppies we wear are made by disabled veterans. We wear the poppies as a reminder of those who died in conflict while fighting for peace, and as reminders of the horrors of conflict and the beauties of peace. That was a little wordy. Cryptologic technician, seaman Thomas Dines was assigned a naval postgraduate school in the Defense Language Institute to learn Vietnamese in order to function as a linguist. He was then transferred to Goodfellow Air Force Base in San Angelo, Texas. Tom was ultimately released from service after 18 months for medical reasons. I am proud of Tom's service. Tom is currently a seasonal resident of Marcos Island, Florida, and Breckenridge, Colorado. Also in 1921, an unknown World War I American soldier was buried in Arlington National Cemetery. This site on the hillside overlooking the Potomac River and the city of Washington became the focal point of reverence for American veterans. Congress voted Armistice Day a legal holiday in 1938, 20 years after the war ended. But by now, Americans realized that the previous war would not be the last. Specialist Scott D. Nelson served in the Army and National Guard from 1984 to 1995. He performed duties as a special electronics device repairer, as a payroll specialist, and as a Korean linguist. He attended training in Fort Gordon, Georgia, and in Monterey, California, both locations I consider to be very, very nice. A friend of his went out and purchased a Virago and took Scott for a ride. He was immediately hooked, and within months, Scott has his own bike, a Yamaha RD400. He has been a Motorcycle Safety Foundation instructor since 1991. From the photos, you can see that Scott has a penchant for go-fast motorcycles. He's now trying to slow down, excuse me, and is restoring a BMW R65. I am proud of Scott and his service. As a side note, I did an IFMR international ride in South Africa, and Scott recently did a ride in France. If you are even remotely considering the Australia IFMR ride 2020, it will likely be a trip you will never forget. World War II began the following year in 1939, and nations great and small again participated in the bloody struggle. My friend, then hospital corpsman Steve Cromwell, remembered the war well. He participated in the Battle of Bulge, had a ship go down in the Pacific, survived the Normandy invasion, survived a kamikaze attack in Okinawa, and was on the Missouri in Tokyo Bay for the surrender of Japan. A few years ago, the now Dr. Stephen Cromwell was summoned by the U.S. Congress and presented a medal. It seemed that he was the last living survivor from the first wave of the Omaha Beach landing. Finally, if you haven't already been impressed with Steve's colorful history, he didn't miss a meeting at his club for over 50 years. I am proud of Steve's service and his friendship. After the Second World War, Armistice Day continued to be observed on November 11th in 1950. In 1953, townspeople in Emporia, Kansas began calling the holiday Veterans Day in gratitude to the veterans of their town. To this day, the Emporia Gazette publishes the list of all veterans that live in that area, including a complete list of Emporia residents that have been killed in combat dating back to the Civil War. Today, about 100 Emporia residents are serving in the Middle East. Soon after, Congress passed a bill introduced by a Kansas congressman renaming the national holiday to Veterans Day. In 1954, President Eisenhower signed a bill proclaiming November 11th as Veterans Day. Paul McAfee served in the U.S. Army from February 68 to February 71. He served in Vietnam from January 69 to January 70 in the 18th Engineering Brigade as a radio operator, a photographer, and a communications chief. He finished his service in Germany in the 3rd Armored Division. Paul was a combat service disabled veteran. I am proud of Paul and his service. Interestingly enough, Paul returned to Vietnam in 2011, 2012 to teach college classes in business using experiential learning. You can see his blog, which is shown on the slide, to see what he was doing in Singapore and probably now in Asheville. On Memorial Day in 1958, 2 more unidentified American war dead were brought from overseas and interred in the plaza beside the unknown soldier of World War I. One was killed in World War II and the other was killed in the Korean War. Specialist Wendell served in the U.S. Army for 5 years from 1999 to 2004. She served in both Operation Enduring Freedom 2002 and Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003 as an Arabic linguist. She has many good memories of her service. She is glad that she never had a job sitting around wearing headphones listening to static, the life of a linguist. She served in the 3rd Armored Cavalry, which deployed to Iraq to participate in nation-building activities such as constructing schools, immunizing kids, rebuilding infrastructure, hospital triage, helping with detainee operations, translate for government meetings, and so on. Also, there were tanks and helicopters. She thought that was pretty cool. While Amanda does not currently have a motorcycle, she would love to have a Triumph America. She previously had a Harley-Davidson Sports Tour. I am proud of Amanda and her service. Americans still give thanks for peace on Veterans Day. There are ceremonies and speeches. At 11 in the morning, most Americans observe a moment of silence, remembering those who fought for peace. After the United States' involvement in the Vietnam War, the emphasis on Veterans Day activities shifted. There were fewer military parades and ceremonies. Veterans gathered at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. to place gifts and stand quiet vigil at the names of their friends and relatives who fell in the war. Families who have lost sons and daughters in wars turn their thoughts to more peace and the avoidance of future wars. Mike was an aviation electronics technician, 2nd class, and also a past president of the Rotary Club of the Carolinas. He recalls working 12-hour shifts 7 days a week at sea, mostly at night due to flight ops. He did get tired of being at sea, but enjoyed seeing the world, visiting many interesting ports of call, such as Naples, Cannes, Athens, Livorno, Beirut, Barcelona, Gibraltar, and Istanbul, among others. Mike recalls a crossing of the North Atlantic in bad weather. They were used to smooth sailing since this is the world's largest, second largest ship with 5,000 sailors. Due to the weather and seas on this crossing, there were several days where they were confined to inside spaces, and all hatches were battened down lest someone get washed overboard. They were in such rough seas that the ship took water across the flight deck. This is affectionately referred to as green water over the flight deck. As a point of reference, the flight deck is 57 feet above the water line. Those are some pretty big waves. Mike had to strap himself into his bunk to keep from being thrown out. I'm proud of Mike and his service. My page is sticking together here. In 1973, a law was passed providing internment of an unknown American from the Vietnam War, but none was found for several years. In 1984, an unknown serviceman from that conflict was placed alongside the others. To honor these men who are symbolic of all Americans who gave their lives in all wars, an Army Honor Guard, the 3rd U.S. Infantry, also referred to as the Old Guard, keeps day and night vigil. If you are unaware, the unknown soldier from the Vietnam conflict was exhumed and has now been identified as Lieutenant Michael Blassie. There will be no more unknown soldiers. While there were no identified members from the Persian Gulf War, almost 6,000 military members and many more civilian men and women have died in the pursuit of the national interests there. I served from 1971 to 1993. I spent 10 years as an enlisted man and 12 years as an officer. Pictured here are my 4 ships, which I spent about 12 years on. There were a few tense moments, but in general, I enjoyed my service, especially the technology. I got to learn some of the most sophisticated equipment on the planet, which was one of the reasons I'm still working for the Navy. I recall the time when off the coast of Vietnam, my critical ship defense system was down and half the officers on the ship were milling around the room asking me for me to fix it. They asked me one too many times when it would be working, and I got a little indignant. The commanding officer bailed me out on that one and sent the officers back to work. In 1986, the Korean War Memorial was opened to the public. That took a long time to get that going. Lieutenant Ron Mead was in the Navy for 3 years from 1973 to 1976. He served at Naval Hospital, Oakland, California, and later on the U.S. Naval Air Station in Nagano, Guam. You may be interested to know that both these organizations have been closed. Most of the places I have worked have closed too. Ron remembers treating Vietnamese refugees in an airplane hangar. He was a dentist, and many of them were poor and had no previous access to dental care. There were a lot of extractions in that hangar. I am proud of Ron and his service. As a side note, my family and I spent 4 years on Guam. It gets a little small after the first couple of weeks. In 2004, the World War II Memorial was finally open to the public. My friend Dr. Cromwell was invited and given a front row seat at the opening ceremony. Today, hundreds of thousands of American men and women serve around the world in service to our nation. So far in the war on terror, we have had 6,717 deaths and 51,000 wounded, for a total of 57,614 military members wounded or killed. I hope that you will take some time to reflect on their service, sacrifice, and contributions. I know that I may have not mentioned everyone in the club with military service, but I do want to tell you that I'm thankful for all your service. Also, I want to say welcome home. Master Sergeant Terry Moore served 8 years active duty and retired from the Army after 41 years of service. He served on active duty in both Desert Storm and Noble Eagle. Terry started out as a military police officer and ended his career as a criminal investigation division agent investigating crime and terrorism. Terry's day job was as a Department of Homeland Security custom agent investigating child pornography and commercial fraud cases. He is now retired from DHS and is employed as his wife household projects lead. When I called, he was installing track lights 14 feet up. In addition to his participation in our club, Terry also spends a significant amount of time working for District 7770. I am proud of Terry and his service. If you haven't heard of it, there's a new Rotary Fellowship. It's the International Fellowship of Rotarian Military Veterans. It's pretty easy to find if you do a search. I'm not sure that military service is in the same vein as service above self, but were there no military, there may not be a Rotary International. Captain Jackson served from May 1981 until December 1986, which was followed by several years as a civil servant with the U.S. Army Tank Automotive Command. While serving at Camp McCoy in Wisconsin, they were in processing Cuban refugees. At around 1907 p.m. one day, his commander asked Jerry if they wanted to work late and finish that night, or if they wanted to break for chow and finish the next day. If they worked late, the commander said that he would make sure that they got to eat. They decided to finish, but when they got done, the commander denied making any statement about food. Jerry stepped up to the plate, got the chow hall opened back up, and sent someone into town for pizza. They had a great time that evening, and his troops always remembered Jerry looking out for them. They made sure that they reciprocated and taught him as much as possible during his tenure. Jerry also made a presentation to the UN researchers at NATO headquarters and almost caused an international incident. The translators told Jerry that jokes don't translate well and he shouldn't tell any. Within a few minutes of starting, Jerry didn't think it was going so well, so he told the joke. The translators weren't very happy, but the crowd laughed. In fact, it went well enough that the French delegation invited Jerry to visit their research and development center. I'm proud of Jerry and his service. In CERTS, we have a lot of service veterans. I would like to extend a happy Veterans Day to them and a very sincere welcome home. Please join me in saluting our service veterans for their service and sacrifice. Okay, Linda, that's all I have.
There you go.
Very nicely done.
Very nice.
There it is.
That was a great presentation. Even though I will have to get after him because he listed me as U.S. Army, and I'm a Marine.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
Kim
okay.
will hear from me.
No, that's okay. We welcome you with
Yeah, he promoted you.
Demoted, you mean? Yes.
No, I saw the promotion papers. They're written in crayon.
If I may, I'd like to talk a little bit about my family in military service. I was born in 1939. I'll pause for a moment while you do the arithmetic. Save you the time, I'm 80. But I had 3 brothers in World War II, one of whom was killed in Corregidor. Very sad for my family, but my brother Dan was killed, and I have no recollection of him because I was just a baby at the time. As I said, I had 3 brothers. My brother Ed was in the reserves and had several tours of duty, served as a colonel, and my brother Mike was wounded in the war. He met his wife, a military nurse at the time, and they got married and raised 5 kids. So my own military experience is quite modest in that I was a 6-month wonder, but I did serve 11 years in the reserves, most of which was in the infantry. as a sergeant, but I did end up my career in the military as a member of the Civil Affairs Company. So I just thought I'd like to bring a different dynamic to that while not serving in the field in that capacity as many of you have. My family was quite well ensconced in the military, losing one brother, one member of my family to World War II. Just thought I would like to add that to the group.
Nice job, David. Very good.
Well, does anybody else have anything? I don't have any military experience at all. And I was just sort of born in the wrong time and in the wrong place, and it never happened. So, but I have to say I've got the utmost respect for those of you who serve and have served. And so I don't really have much to say about any of that because I just don't know anything about it.
Jim, that was a magnificent presentation.
Mm-hmm. It's very well organized.
Yeah, it was well done.
Yeah.
Brian, I can assure you that your experience in the ER would translate directly.
Yeah, and they are for sure. Especially in Miami.
And it's been crazy. Seems like the shifts are 12 hours of mayhem or 10 hours of mayhem.
Oh yeah.
Just solid.
Called controlled chaos.
Exactly.
Yeah, I swear the days that I had to work at the hospital, got to work at the hospital doing triage, and I used to translate when they take people into surgery and talk them down through anesthesia and back out. Not knowing those words, trying to explain what a catheter was and how it was going to work was awkward. And B, I can assure you that I was exhausted at the end of those days. Far more exhausting than riding around in a truck was.
I can see, Emilio, you've got your U.S. Army, sporting your U.S. Army coat up there, or what is that?
It's called a talking piece. That piece was given to me by one of my adopted daughters. She spent 12 years in the U.S. Army, and now she is a surgical tech nurse in Southern California. That was given to me when she graduated from Fort Benning, Georgia, in 2005. And then we were still living in Nevada then. And from there, she went to Fayetteville, North Carolina, to the I can't remember the fort right now, but she was attached to the 101st Airborne Division. So she has her parachuting. She was the pace setter. She was all over the top, and her story is pretty something that we're glad we were involved, because when we took her, she was left on the steps of her burned down house in Nevada. Her parents abandoned 3 kids in front of the house. They had no place to go, no place to anything. And my wife, she's a high school teacher, and she had been teaching in Nevada for about 12 years then, when she called me and said, Daisy needs a home, because the other 2 kids are going to different parents. And at that time, we only had Franco. Franco was 7 years old. And I said, well, we have an extra room. Bring her in, and then we go from there. We didn't know the kind of problems that she had. She could barely speak English. She could barely write. She could barely read. She could even barely speak Spanish. We didn't know what was wrong with her. So we had to work with her. And when she graduated from high school, we weren't sure if she was college material, and because we really were at, how are we gonna do with her? And she couldn't even pass the ASVAB, if that tells you something. So we helped her. She finally got a good score in the ASVAB, and she went into the Army. Then she started doing all those things. So we're so grateful that the Army took her, and because we're not sure what we're gonna do. This child already was formed. She had been living with us for 7 years, and finally something clicked in her. She decided that she was going to be a nurse, and I'm like, okay, you can't see a wound, you faint when you see blood. She was determined. So in 9 months after she was sent to Sam Houston, she became a nurse, and then she married later on, and she has 2 wonderful kids with a husband, and she met the husband in the military, another enlisted man, which we told her, don't marry an enlisted man, and she married one anyway. So, but it's a wonderful husband. He's going to be a doctor and chiropractor in May. He graduates in May, now that they both are out of the Army. But that's a wonderful experience for us with her. And then after that, I went ahead and adopted one more child. So I have another daughter that she turned 23 in this past October, and so I have 2 adopted girls and my own son. And we're so proud that she went to the Army, and she listened to us and to Pop. My father-in-law, he's an Army guy too. He was in Vietnam for 4 years, and we were reading the letters that he was sending to Grandma. Every time he sent a letter, he had different rank. It would change, every other month. And it was kind of funny because he was in charge of the pharmacy in there. The only reason they put him in charge of the pharmacy, he says, is because he had a degree in embalming. He was going to be a funeral director when he got out of Boston College, and that's what they put him in there. But he couldn't keep up on his rank because he's rebellious. One time he took if you pardon me, this ladies, the mama sands down to the beach on the Dusseldorf, about 24 of them. So then he got caught, and then he got demoted because of that. So things like that he did. So some of you will know, but it's pretty interesting. So I do have ties to military family. My father-in-law one, and then my daughter and the husband, and many friends. So I'm proud of my people that I have served in the military.
Where did you live in Nevada, Emilio?
Las Vegas, Nevada.
Oh, you lived in, and you even say it right.
I live in 5 minutes from the airport, in McCarran Airport, which everybody calls Las Vegas Airport. It's not called Las Vegas Airport. It's called McCarran.
McCarran International, yeah.
Yeah, McCarran International, and that was named after the Senator McCarran. After 1933, then when he served, and I live just 7 minutes from there. I owned that house until this past summer when I sold it. So that was my last ties to Nevada.
Emilio, I think we always talk about, we always thank the people who served active duty. And I have to say, like with you, obviously with your daughter and your family, I deployed the first time when my son was 7 months old. and left Mike alone in Colorado with him, and from 7 months until 13 months, and then again from 18 months until he was almost 2. And actually more than 2. And I think that I wish that we did a better job of calling out the families that support us, because we definitely couldn't do what we did without the support that we had back home. So thank you for that.
No, thank you for your service.
That's a good reminder, really good reminder. Thanks.
I put in the chat, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that there's so many linguists in the Rotary Club, right? How many of us were there? At least 3, I think. Me, Scott, who was the other one?
Tom Dines.
Tom, yeah. And I think there's actually more than that, but just those ones that were called out. It's kind of funny. I guess it makes sense if you think about what we do.
Well,
I wish I have the reels from my father-in-law, but I don't know if there is a company that does the recording of the reel to reel. We have in our house those from the reels that I got sent as mail instead.
Are those audio recordings or are they movies?
No, those are audio recordings.
You should look around wherever you are now, because the magnetic coating on that tape can eventually deteriorate and flake off. So you'll want to get them converted if they're still in good shape right away.
They are. I have them in a sealed container because of that.
You should get them digitized. There should be a place that'll do that for you near you.
I will do that.
Where are you, Emilio?
Now I'm in Malden, South Carolina. Greenville, South Carolina. Or for Harold, Greenville.
Greenville.
Oh, I know. I have a cousin who lives in Malden. How long have you been in?
I've been here since 2006.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
hey, Juan, would you mind muting your microphone?
Hey, I'm here.
Clip.
Hi there, over here.
Yeah, I was asking you to mute your microphone. We were hearing you walk all over the room.
Sorry for that. Yeah, walking with my cell phone all over the office. Hi, guys.
Well, it's good to see your smiling face anyway.
Oh, thank you very much. Same. By the way, great presentation. I'm really thrilled to be in the same club as with so many military mates.
I'm a little surprised we don't have any of our Canadian members who are military. Maybe they didn't respond to the request.
I wonder if that's the case. They just thought maybe it was American military and they didn't. But I think Jim actually put out, I saw an email saying everybody that's.
Yep.
Yeah.
They might have missed it because I don't remember seeing that either.
He sent it, gosh, it's been a couple months now because he's been putting this together for a bit.
Yeah, he's been planning this for quite a while.
It'll give him something to add for next year.
Yep, for sure.
And you call Veterans Day, in Canada it's called Remembrance Day.
Remembrance Day, yeah. And is it celebrated on the 11th as well?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. It's 10 minutes till. Do you guys want to chat or do you want to close this thing up?
Well, personally, if you want to close it up, you can close out. But those of us that want to stick around and chat,
I have a flight tomorrow morning at dark 30 out of Miami to go to Milwaukee. So I'm probably gonna I got to be at the airport at 5:30 tomorrow morning.
yeah. But don't you know it's snowing back there?
I was gonna say you're headed the wrong way, sir.
Yeah, I sure
Wrong
am.
direction.
But they invite us to interview only once, so it is what it is.
Yeah, grab it while you can.
That's right. That's right.
No,
Well, good luck.
Thank you. I only got one interview in Florida, so the rest are in colder regions. But I did get Elko, Nevada.
Huh?
So
Wow.
yeah. Yeah.
Are you coming this way? Are you going to be up in Virginia area at all, Brian?
No, it looks like Detroit and then South Carolina and Nevada, and for now, that's where I'm. I have 6 interviews, and 2 of them are in Nevada.
2 of them in Nevada, 1 in Elko. Where was the other one in Nevada?
In Reno.
Oh, Reno, yeah.
Yeah.
That's better. Well,
Which hospital in Detroit?
It is. That's a guy. You know what? I don't know what the hospital is. The program is actually outside of Detroit, and they have a clinic, a small, like what they call an urban track clinic in, but it's U of Michigan.
Hey, do me a favor and send me a note about that because my sister-in-law is involved with that program. She's a nurse practitioner there. I think it's probably the same one. Yep.
Okay, I'll do it. Yeah.
And she's actually a professor at U of M. She's in their nursing program, and then she's my doctor nurse sister. She's got her doctorate in nursing. I don't ever know what to call her, but she's definitely. I think it sounds like the same program she's involved with.
Okay. Okay.
Doctor.
Yeah, and it seems like a really interesting program. They're not, you know, like the residency isn't based in Detroit, but they all work in Detroit. So
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Send me a note and I'll connect you guys.
Oh, that would be great. All right. I go up there in December, so there's a little time. That's great.
Okay. Cool. Yeah,
All
she's good people.
All right. Well, I'm going to say goodnight because I'm going to go figure out how to get packed and get ready for this thing. I will see everybody next week, hopefully with a job.
Let's hope so.
Good luck.
Break a leg.
Good luck, Brian.
Yeah, good luck.
Great week, everyone. Stay warm.
Yeah.